Parthia is often treated as Rome's eastern enemy. But the evidence shows something richer. A flexible Iranian empire built from horses, cities, coins, nobles, trade, and negotiated power. That contradiction is the point. An empire can be powerful even when it does not look Roman, centralized, or familiar. The Roman angle is useful only when it reveals Parthian strategy, distance, diplomacy, and the limits of conquest. After Alexander's conquests, Iranian lands did not become simply Greek. They became contested, mixed, and politically unstable. Small inscriptions and portraits matter, because they show rulers speaking to more than one audience at once. The Seleucid Empire inherited vast territories, but distance made every eastern province harder to hold. The Arsacid story begins with the Parnai, horsemen from the steppe edge moving into Parthia. The steppe edge matters, because mobility was not background flavor. It shaped how power moved, fought, and survived. The military point is discipline, not exotic spectacle. Mobility worked because it was organized. Arsaces became the founding name of a dynasty that turned rebellion into legitimacy. Nisa became an early Arsacid stronghold where power, storage, ritual, and administration left archaeological traces. Nisa is crucial because it gives Parthia rooms, vessels, storage, and ritual traces instead of only enemy descriptions. It shows Arsacid power before Rome becomes the loudest source. These places make Parthia concrete, turning a vague Eastern Empire into rooms, roads, cities, and courts. Parthian power depended on horses, mobility, and aristocratic war bands more than marble capitals. The mounted archer became Parthia's signature image. But behind it stood land, rank, and training. Heavy armored cavalry gave Parthia a shock force that later empires would remember. The famous Parthian shot was not a trick. It was a battlefield system built around speed, timing, and discipline. The famous shot only worked inside a larger system of horses, training, distance, supply, and command. Mithridates I transformed Parthia from a regional power into a major empire. The social evidence is fragmentary, but it keeps the empire from becoming only a battlefield story. When Parthia moved into Media, it entered the old heartland of Iranian kingship. Control of Babylonia gave the Arsacids wealth, records, and old imperial prestige. Babylonia gave the Arsacids more than wealth. It gave them archives, cities, prestige, and an older imperial language. Seleucia remained a Greek-speaking urban giant inside a Parthian imperial world. Across the river, Ctesiphon grew into a royal center and symbol of Parthian presence in Mesopotamia. Hecatompylos shows how Parthian power could face both the Iranian plateau and the roads toward Central Asia. Ecbatana tied Parthian rule to an older Median and Achaemenid landscape of prestige. Parthian kings moved through a network of courts, cities, and noble territories rather than ruling from one fixed center. Movement was not always weakness. A traveling court could bind nobles, cities, and regions without pretending one capital controlled everything. Parthia was not ruled from one simple capital. Power moved between courts, cities, and noble territories. Arsacid kings used Iranian, Hellenistic, and local symbols to speak to different audiences. Parthian coins preserve kings' titles, style changes, and political messages when texts are thin. Coins matter because Parthian written histories are thin. A portrait and title can become evidence when narrative sources are hostile or missing. Even style changes can hint at claims, audiences, and political stress. Greek remained important in Parthian cities. coins, and administration, even under Iranian kings. Parthian kings also drew on Iranian nobility, fire rituals, and memories of older rule. The empire held many local kings and client rulers, making authority layered and negotiated. Powerful noble families could support kings, challenge kings, and shape succession. Parthia was strong, but it was not a centralized machine like some later empires. Parthia sat across routes linking the Mediterranean, Iran, Central Asia, and India. Trade did not make Parthia peaceful by default, but it made the empire a middle space where goods and information crossed frontiers. Trade routes carried more than goods. They carried political leverage, news, styles, and risk. Parthian lands became a middle zone in long-distance trade before the Silk Road became a legend. Merv connected Parthia to Central Asia, oasis trade, and frontier defense. Hatra shows the mixed religious, military, and urban world on Parthia's western edge. Durieuropos reveals how frontier cities could change hands and preserve many cultures at once. Caravan cities like Palmyra were not Parthian capitals, but they belonged to the same trade world. Rome entered Parthia's story not as destiny, but as another power reaching for eastern routes and prestige. Crassus marched east seeking glory, but he entered terrain and tactics he did not understand. At Carrhae, Parthian cavalry broke a Roman army and rewrote Rome's fear of the East. Carrhae is not important because Rome lost once. It is important because it exposed the limits of Roman assumptions. The desert, cavalry timing, and supply problem all mattered before the final disaster. Surina became the face of Carrhae, but his power also shows how dangerous great nobles could be. Captured Roman standards became symbols of humiliation, diplomacy, and negotiated memory. Mark Antony also failed in the East, proving Parthia was not a one-battle accident. Augustus recovered the standards through diplomacy, turning negotiation into Roman victory theater. Augustus turned diplomacy into victory theater, which reminds us that memory can be staged after the danger passes. Armenia and other buffer kingdoms became chessboards between Rome and Parthia. Armenia mattered because whoever influenced it gained roads, mountains, and legitimacy near both empires. Rome and Parthia fought repeatedly, but their frontier was also full of trade, talks, and local survival. Trajan briefly reached Ctesiphon, but holding Mesopotamia was harder than entering it. Hadrian abandoned many eastern gains, showing the cost of ruling beyond the Euphrates. Parthia survived defeats because its power was distributed through nobles, cities, and cavalry networks. Distributed power could absorb defeat better than a brittle center, but it also gave ambitious nobles room to challenge kings. Parthian religion was not one simple system. Local gods, Iranian traditions, Greek forms, and Mesopotamian cults overlapped. Mitra appears in Iranian and later Roman contexts, but we must avoid flattening different traditions into one. Parthian-era temple cities preserved older sacred landscapes while adapting to new rulers. Parthian art often faces the viewer directly, creating a distinct visual language of presence. Parthian rock reliefs linked kings, nobles, gods, and memory in stone. Elite Parthian women appear through burials, images, and court context, though the sources remain limited. Burials and grave goods give evidence for status, identity, and regional difference. The Parthians left fewer narrative histories than Rome and Greece, so their story often arrives through outsiders. Silence is part of the method here. The fewer Parthian voices we have, the more carefully we must read every object and outsider account. Roman writers turned Parthia into fear, insult, admiration, and propaganda. Chinese records also saw Parthia as part of a far western trading world. Coins, ceramics, glass, textiles, and routes show connections beyond battlefield stories. Rome could win battles, but distance, cavalry, supply, and local politics made conquest unstable. Parthia's loose strength also became a weakness when rival nobles and claimants divided authority. In the 3rd century, Ardashir of Persis challenged Arsacid rule and began a new Iranian dynasty. The ending has to protect Parthia's own meaning instead of treating it as a waiting room for the Sasanians. The last Arsacid king lost to a challenger who claimed stronger royal and sacred legitimacy. The Sasanians did not erase Parthia. They absorbed, opposed, and reworked parts of its world. The Sasanian takeover was a transformation of Iranian power, not a clean erasure of everything Arsacid. Noble families, cavalry traditions, court habits, and regional politics did not simply disappear overnight. Parthian legacy survived in noble families, cavalry warfare, frontier politics, and the memory of Rome's limits. Calling Parthians mere horsemen-hide cities. Diplomacy, trade, art, and political complexity. The Rome versus East story hides buffer kingdoms, merchants, envoys, mixed armies, and shared frontiers. The best Parthian story comes from coins, archaeology, foreign records, and careful gaps. Not one victorious voice. Parthia matters because it shows an empire can be powerful without looking centralized, Roman, or familiar. If Parthia lasted by being flexible, local, mobile, and hard to define, was that weakness or genius? The question matters because Parthia's difference is exactly what made it durable and hard to describe. When Parthian voices fall silent, the evidence does not. Parthia's flexibility was messy, but it helped the empire survive pressure from steppe routes, Iranian nobles, Mesopotamian cities, and Rome. So the better question is not why Parthia failed to become Rome. It is how Parthia made Rome adapt to a flexible Iranian empire of writers, cities, nobles, trade, and negotiated power. Watch the full Lore Atlas episode to see Parthia on its own terms.